So let's say you're doing your job, you're in the midst of performing your work, and you come across something so shocking, so sickening, so frightening that it causes you to have ongoing nightmares, insomnia, uh, becoming essentially frozen in your job, in the world, full of anxiety, in some cases, unable to leave your home, unable to work, really unable to do anything else. I'm not talking about, a mean boss, the work environment that they're in, or harassment from fellow employees or anything like that. And I'm not talking about where you suffer life-threatening injuries and you have these nightmares, etc. from that. That kind of case where you have life-threatening injuries and you also have the psychiatric stuff going on, that's fairly simple to prove in a workers' comp case. And it's just an outgrowth of the physical stuff that happens to you and all the trouble that comes from it, and it bleeds over into the psychological. What I'm talking about is exposure to something extremely shocking and frightening on the job where you yourself are not really physically injured. The psychological symptoms that occurred from that as a result of exposure to seeing such a thing for a normal person, this is called post-traumatic stress disorder. In some cases, it's called post-traumatic stress syndrome. We've spoken about this in some other places on some other videos. What if it's your job to come across these sorts of things all the time? For instance, if you're a firefighter or you're a police officer, right? So it used to be that it was much harder to get to that bar to overcome many of the impediments in the law that would allow you to prove a case, a workers' comp case, if it was your normal job to see these sorts of things. First of all, you have a situation where you don't have physical injury, but just exposure to horrible things at work, especially if it's more than one exposure, such as, again, these horrific scenes that are encountered by many first responders all the time. That's considered not an injury claim like a normal workers' comp claim, but an occupational disease claim. It used to be that unless you satisfied for officers, police officers and firefighters, unless you satisfied the very difficult standard of meeting occupational disease for that PTSD, it was difficult but not impossible to show that the PTSD came out of your work and was therefore an appropriate occupational disease for which you could receive compensation. If it's a one-time event, sometimes the commission, instead of over many years of suffering, sometimes the commission would knock those out, say, look, it's your job to see this stuff, and we're sorry you're suffering, but this is your job to do this. It's really not a sudden shock or fright, and sorry, too bad, so sad, you don't have a claim. So I'm happy to report that as of July 1st, 2020, a law went on the books in Virginia, and that law recognizes this terrible toll that oftentimes what police officers and firefighters specifically have to deal with in the field. These horrible situations and traumatic events that they face can eventually, take their toll on them. And what they did is they decided to go ahead and pass this new law that gave them limited workers' compensation benefits and made it very easy for them to recover those benefits if they suffer post-traumatic stress syndrome as a result of their exposure to these situations. This law is a bit of a mixed bag, which makes it much easier to get benefits for police officers and firefighters in Virginia, but it does unfortunately severely limit the extent of those same benefits for those folks. And that is what we're going to talk about today. I'm Joe Miller, as you may know, workers' compensation attorney and personal injury attorney in Virginia and North Carolina. And I want to talk to you today about the relatively new law that can be found in Virginia Code, and it's just for those who want to look it up. It's at Virginia Code section 65.2-107. And this code section specifically provides for workers' compensation benefits for Virginia police officers and firefighters who are diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, as a result of either a traumatic event or several traumatic events that they may have been exposed to, but they tend to focus on one traumatic event, the last one that it could be the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. This statute, as I mentioned before, came into effect July 1st, 2020, and it applies to any event which occurs after the date and provides medical treatment for the PTSD, as we mentioned, like seeing a psychiatrist or a psychologist. And if you're unable to work or have to work in a lower capacity, it provides weekly workers' compensation benefits for up to, here's the kicker, only 52 weeks. That's 1 year, okay? 52 weeks for treatment, 52 weeks for your weekly benefits. And so the treatment has to be prescribed and engaged in by a board-certified psychiatrist or a licensed psychologist, okay? So that's what you have to do. There must also be what's known as, and what it says in the statute, a quote-unquote qualifying event, okay, that form the basis of the claim for benefits. And the claim benefit has to be filed. This is another interesting thing, within 4 years from the qualifying event. You know, usually in Virginia and in most other states that I'm aware of, workers' compensation benefits have to be filed within 2 years of, whatever your accident date is, okay? But I guess this is a recognition, I'm thinking, by the legislature that, look, sometimes the full negative psychiatric effects of a traumatic event may take a lot more than 2 years to fully manifest in somebody who's gone through something horrific. So they give you 4 years to make this claim. What do they mean by a qualifying event? What does the statute mean by that? So it lays it out in the law, and it means an incident or exposure occurring in the line of duty which fits certain criteria that are mentioned in the statute. Again, it has to occur after July 1st, 2020, and here they are. First one, serious bodily injury to any person, not just the claimant, it's important, any person, or an incident involving a minor who has been injured, killed, abused, or exploited. Third one, an immediate threat to the life of the claimant, that's the person making the claim, or anyone else. Could be anybody at the crime scene, not just the officer or the firefighter, or an event responding to mass casualties, or responding to crime scenes for investigation. So that's a pretty broad bunch of traumatic events that one could be involved in your line of duty, either as a police officer or a firefighter. So really what the legislature did here was they put a stop to this notion of requiring a sudden shock or fright by defining what they mean by this qualifying event, okay? Because one could argue many of these events, investigating a crime scene, maybe that's not sudden or shocking for somebody that does this every day. But the legislature recognized, I think, that, sometimes, after a while, especially in certain circumstances, this stuff can get to you. And it can cause you to stay up at night and cause all kinds of symptoms that really impair you from doing your job. So they made it so that, look, let's give you some time off, let's let you get some treatment, and we're going to recognize that this happens and we need to address it, okay? Now, in the case law before this statute, officers and firefighters really had to recite like a litany of horrific things that happened to them that they exclusively and only at their job were exposed to at work over many years to qualify really for occupational disease benefits for PTSD and even other psychiatric injuries from their job. The bad news is that the Workers' Compensation Commission has come out with some case law more recently in 2022. You used to be able to file for ongoing benefits beyond the 52 weeks if you're a police officer or a firefighter. Let's say your PTSD is so bad that, from whatever you've been exposed to, no matter how many times you've been exposed to it, that you're debilitated now and you can never go back to duty and you really can never work again. I mean, sometimes PTSD does get that bad. Unfortunately, the Virginia Workers' Comp Commission, the full commission in Richmond, has said at this time, look, we don't make the law, we interpret the law, and we think that what the legislature said when they passed this statute is that while we're making it easier for them to make these claims, okay, of PTSD, we are going to limit those claims totally to 52 weeks, okay? So we don't care if you've got a lifetime of being unable to work, you're not going to be able to make a claim beyond the 52 weeks. As far as the Workers' Comp Commission is concerned, their only remedy beyond that is to go back to duty, suffer another qualifying event, and come out again for another 52 weeks. I don't think it's fair. I think in the case law, if you read the case that says this from August of 2022, even the Workers' Comp Commission kind of said, look, we don't like this either, but this is the way our job really is to interpret the law, not to make it. If the legislature wants to jump in and fix this, they can go in and fix this some way. It's my sincere hope that the Virginia legislature at some point takes this up and puts in some kind of fix to this statute and says, look, we didn't mean to limit this. There are still available other options. If somebody doesn't want to use or take advantage of this 52-week limit statute under Section 107, they can go to other sections where, although it's harder to prove, you can go and try to claim lifetime benefits, which are up to 500 weeks, as you may know, in Virginia, plus lifetime medical benefits for your psychiatric illness. If you're in a different type of occupation where you are subject to frequent exposure to traumatic events and witnessing traumatic events outside of being a police officer or a firefighter, you still have available to you the other options for claiming occupational disease in Virginia. It's harder. It's a harder thing to prove, but it's not impossible. And so if you or a loved one are suffering from PTSD or other psychiatric disabilities due to a work injury or exposure to severe trauma at work in Virginia, please don't hesitate to call us at the number on the screen and reach out to us on our website. We'd be happy to discuss the case with you discreetly. I know it's hard for some folks to get past that part. Some people are embarrassed about this. You have no reason to be embarrassed. This is a common thing. We see it all the time. It's hard. It's hard on the families. It's hard on the people that suffer from this. I'm well aware of that, but we're here to help. We'd be happy to discuss your case with you or any other family member that you want to designate to discuss it with us. Meanwhile, this is Joe Miller, workers' compensation and personal injury attorney in Virginia and North Carolina, signing off. Have a blessed day. Joe Miller out.